Marvel's Avengers was a game I was very excited for up until I played the beta, which left me very skeptical about whether or not the game was going to be any good. So after watching more videos and seeing what others thought about the beta, I then decided I was going to get the game after all. I then got the game and felt like I was fucked harder than the last time me and my wife spent time together. I'm going to break down this review into several categories, which include the story/campaign, the world, the characters, the skills, and then finally some bugs I ran across when playing the game. After we discuss those topics, we'll get to my final decision on whether or not you should play Marvel's Avengers. The story for Marvel's Avengers was very lackluster in my opinion. It wasn't interesting at all. To be perfectly honest, it was quite boring. Despite having two of my favorite voice actors of all time in Troy Baker and Nolan North, I did not like any of the characters. I didn't like MODOK as a bad guy either. It seemed to me like he was getting his ass kicked around every corner and I never felt threatened by him a single time. Monica was even worse and all she did was talk shit without actually doing anything. At least MODOK put a fight up at the end of the game. And I'm not counting the time Monica got her ass in a mech and tried to fight me. It was an awful fight, and she got her ass kicked. In the end, the villains were incredibly easy to forget, and the fact that the story randomly decides which Avenger I'm going to play as really irritates me. Because I don't like certain missions being character specific. The story was uninspired and uninteresting, and the biggest offense of all to me was how short the game was. If you go into games for the story, skip this one. As far as the world goes, I can't remember the last time I played a game that felt this copy and pasted. It was probably Breakpoint. I hate this world so much because I had so much hope of what could be in store for me, but it was absolutely ruined when I actually started exploring. This game's world was no fun at all to explore, and it was definitely hurt by the fact that there was basically nothing to do. The city areas having a ceiling on them so you couldn't go up too high really pissed me off. Then there was the fact that you basically couldn't do anything when exploring the city except find a few enemies that randomly popped up, fight them for the 4 seconds it took to beat them, and then maybe you might find a chest somewhere. That chest would of course have shit in it that you didn't need at all. Then the woodland areas were as copy and pasted as anything that I have ever seen. They of course had a ceiling on them as well. The occasional enemies that popped up, you fought for a few seconds. Maybe they dropped some loot you didn't need, and then around the corner was a chest or something you could break open for more shit you didn't need. If you came to this game to explore the world, don't. Now let's look at the characters. I've never been an Iron Man fan, and I knew this game was not by any stretch of the imagination going to change that. Tony Stark was just an annoying rich smartass. I don't think there was a single time where he spoke and I didn't either want to skip it or I just didn't care what the fuck he was saying. Words can't express how much I wanted Nolan North to make Iron Man interesting to me, but not even he could do that. I honestly believe he was given the job of voicing Tony Stark not because they wanted a good job to be done, but because they wanted Nolan North fans to play the game. I honestly felt like Iron Man wasn't that important to this story, minus like one mission. As far as Bruce Banner goes, Bruce came off way too whiny, and when he was the Hulk, well, he's not super in-depth now, is he? Troy Baker will go down in history to me as the single best voice actor the video game industry has ever seen, but he could not make this character something that I liked. I understand what Bruce was going through in the game, thinking he'd lost Cap and feeling like superheroes were dangerous for the world, but please do me a favor and don't get me excited for Troy Baker just to have him whining for a 10-hour story. Now for Captain America. I went into this game wanting to play Captain America because he's my favorite Avenger, and he was gone for nearly the entire story due to his death, which was later revealed to be Monica taking him from the crash at the beginning of the game. When I did finally get to play as Cap again, the level in which you get to play him is pretty cool for about the 2 minutes it takes to finish it. Then Cap goes to a point that I wish he didn't. I simply feel, much like my opinion of Iron Man, he didn't have much impact on the story. Sure, he was an Avenger and he helped them fight, but I do not at all feel like he did much of anything that I didn't make him do. Even on the last level of the game, you run around most all of the time with help. I just don't feel like there was anything he did that could not have been accomplished by anyone else. Now the God of Thunder. Thor was probably my favorite character in the game, but that's because you could throw Mjolnir and pin someone to the ground for an eternity and then punch them to death. Other than that and some funny dialogue about how he's the best Avenger and the strongest, there wasn't much here. His design seemed very generic and like much more could have been done with him look-wise. He came off feeling to me like he was the biggest missed opportunity in the game. I enjoyed crushing AIM forces with him and absolutely nothing else. I was provided a small amount of skills and tricks, but almost exclusively used his range attack because of how overpowered it was. Now for the spider. Black Widow was fun to look at, that's about it. She might have pissed me off more than any other character in the game because of the beta and the opening of the game where she fights Taskmaster. That fight gave me hope for how boss fights were going to be. My brain said, oh, this is going to be like Dark Souls and Neo where you actually have to dodge and think. But no, every boss fight was a complete fustercluck of all your AI companions just swinging and you standing back to easily avoid damage. Her look was fine because she was always going to be fine as hell, but nothing else about her was likable. Kamala, our main character, was cute and fun in the most adorable way. She was such a dork that I felt like she was basically everyone that would have got to hang out with the Avengers. She was fun to play until I realized that basically no enemy in the game could contend with her heavy attack combo. After that, she became quite boring to play. I didn't mind her look, her voice acting, or anything else. She honestly felt like the most useful character, but I'm guessing that was the point. In a cast of boring and frankly unlikable people, she was the standout. If this game had just simply been her, I wouldn't be wishing I could refund the life hours I put into this. Let's look at the skills. Avengers falls into a category I feel like a lot of games do nowadays. It throws a few generic skills into a game and thinks that its skill tree is in-depth and lengthy, and then goes on with its life. But in reality, this is a tiny skill tree with some of the most useless skills and abilities on it that I've seen in quite a long time. You can beat this game to pieces without upgrading a single skill. That is an easy thing I use to determine whether or not a skill tree is fucking with me. It was a complete and total waste of time that, if I'm speaking honestly, needs to be completely changed because it's more than useless. I played Assassin's Creed Unity for years without any of the issues people talked about plaguing them on launch. I will not be able to say the same thing about Avengers. This game crashed about 30 times in the transition shot from Cap to Thor and Iron Man at the opening bridge attack. After spending several hours and doing a whole lot of other stuff to fix that, I spent the rest of the game with random FPS issues, terrible scene transitions, weird model drops when moving back and forth between characters, and a lot of issues when jumping toward ledges. I won't soon forget the issues this game had on launch for me. So in closing, should you buy Avengers right now? Absolutely not. I don't even think this game should have been released in its current state. It's way too buggy and has way too little content to justify the full price tag on it. Should you wait for a sale? Yeah. A sale where the game's about 15 bucks. Because that's literally what I think it should be released for. Finally, was Avengers a good game? No, it was not. All of the above things mentioned led me to finally tell myself this was not a good game. It felt very rushed and incomplete. It had a lot of potential, but it ultimately failed to capitalize on that, and instead was bland, boring, and felt very unready to be on the market.